Welcome to Color Country Politics, where we discuss all the important political issues facing Iron County, Utah. Our guests include elected officials and community leaders in or representing Iron County. This is episode 49, 2020 Candidate Forum, Kristan Norton, State School Board 15.
And welcome back to Color Country Politics. We're excited to have you here on our new format via Zoom, because that is the world that we live in right now. So welcome. I'm Jennie Hendricks, and I am here with my co-host,
Jesse Harris.
And we're really excited today. We're kind of moving into a different space. We've got Kristan Norton with us today. Kristan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're really glad you're here. So this is kind of an interesting race this cycle because Kristan is running for state school board. And this is the first time that state school board has been a partisan race. So our audience knows normally we ask, sort of the same series of questions, but I wanted to just get your thoughts on the fact that this is now a kind of a new thing with the partisan race. And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are your thoughts on that, first of all?
Well, it's a new thing, and sometimes it's hard to change to new ideas and new thoughts. And yet, on the other hand, sometimes that can improve the process. I think we're going to have to see how the board makeup turns out with all of this in order to see if it was a good thing or not a bad thing. Just a little bit of background on it. In the past, there was a frequent number of people who were elected to the board that would then drop out, and the governor would then nominate somebody to be on the state school board. And I think that people were concerned about that particular process, of where it could go. And it ended up in a big court case, and the state Supreme Court ended up saying that it needed to be a partisan race, so people could know who they were getting and understand that. I hate to see education politicized. Yeah. And I think that we need to always make sure that the people that we elect to jobs that have to do with education of our children, they need to understand that above all else, that those children and their education is at the forefront, and many of the political things need to be left to legislatures and national races. But on the other hand, there are some very important things that the different political parties bring to the table. And this year, we know that District 15, which is Iron and Washington County, that seat will be held by a Republican because the three candidates are all Republicans.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting history. Thanks for that. I did not know that it had gone to court, and that's the reason that we are where we are. So that's a really interesting perspective. Thank you. Well, let's kind of turn now and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a native of District 15. I was actually born in Cedar City, and I have lived most of my life in St. George. So I am a combination. I went to North Elementary in Cedar City, and my forefathers were original settlers of the valley. I come from the Adams, Bullock, Hewlett families. Wow. So I can say that education's in my DNA because they were all closely tied to education in Iron County. Both of my parents were also educators in Iron County. My dad was the Coach Hal Norton, who was the football coach at Cedar City High School and track coach. And my mom was Aldine Adams Norton, and she was at Cedar Middle School. We then relocated to St. George, where they still continued on in education. And I went to school in St. George, graduated from Dixie, what is now Dixie State University. At that time, it was Dixie College. I returned back to Cedar City, where I got my education degree at SUU, and then also my master's degree from SUU. I have been a classroom teacher for 24 years, which I think is another thing that makes me, qualified for this job. Not only am I a lifetime resident of this district, but I'm also a classroom teacher. And my belief is that in matters of education, it's important to have the perspective of an educator. And I would be the teacher on the board. Right now, there are 2 teachers on the board, but they have both decided not to run again. So I would be the teacher that's on the board. And I think that perspective is very important to have when they're making those decisions about education. I also work at SkyWest Airlines. I've worked there for 33 years as a financial analyst. And I love my education job. I love teaching and I love those students, and I am missing my students greatly at this time.
I'll bet. I hear that from a lot of educators. It's a hard thing. I'm sure it's hard on the kids. It's hard on the educators. It's a strange and unusual time that we're.
It is. But boy, are we lucky that we live in this part of the state, because we have the greatest parents ever, and they are just buckling down and jumping in. And I'm really happy at the great support that we've received from these wonderful parents.
That's great. That's great. Now they all know. They're going to know as soon as this podcast goes.
Good.
So tell us why you decided to run for this office.
Well, I decided to run for this office first and foremost for the reason that I said originally, that education decisions need to be made by an educator, in collaboration with the business community, the administrators, legislators, especially parents. So I think there needs to be a well-rounded board, but it does need to have at least one educator on there. That is one of the main reasons. I am also running for this position, partially because of a principal that I have been working for about 22 years. He is just retired, and he was the kind of a person who had respect for us as teachers, had respect for the district, and then he was a great go-between to take our concerns to the district, and the district in their perspective and their influence, and brought it back to us. And that's what I want to do with the state legislature. I want to work with the students and the parents, our local school administrators, take that to Northern Utah and share that with them. We have great things that are happening in Southern Utah. We can teach Northern Utah how to do a lot of things. I every day I am making a list of some of the great things that are happening with Southern Utah schools. And I think that story needs to be told in Northern Utah. We build buildings for less money than anybody else in the state. We have district administrators that are doing the work of 10 people. We have a very low administrator to student ratio. And you look at a school like Parowan Elementary, nationally recognized as a Title I school. They recognized 2 schools last year in the whole nation. Parowan Elementary was one of those, because they took a group of students who maybe have some economic disadvantages, which could mean that you don't have 8 snowmobiles in your driveway, but those students and those teachers and those administrators and especially those parents all got together and did great things, and those students had great achievement. That's the kind of story that needs to be told in Northern Utah, and that's the kind of story I want to tell.
That's fantastic. So I think you kind of answered this question, a lot of it already, but I'm going to throw it out there just for the sake of consistency.
Okay.
So what specific things do you hope to accomplish if you're elected?
Well, you're right. I did just mention about telling our story and beating our drum, but there's some concerns that I have as a teacher that I see, and this shows up in the eyes of those students that I look at every day, and in the frustration from parents. And one of those things would be testing. I believe in testing. I know that we need to test. I learned so much from the results of the tests that we give, but I think we test too much. My family are into livestock, and there's an old livestock saying that your cows or sheep, in our family's case, don't gain any weight standing on the scales. They gain weight out grazing, and that's the way it is in education. Those students aren't getting smarter by taking tests. By learning, by doing, by experimenting, by observing, that's how they get smarter. And so when we test day after day after day after day after day, we're limiting that learning time. And I feel like all the stakeholders here need to get on the same page and reduce the amount of testing that we're doing, share the results a little better, and maybe we can help our students feel a little less anxiety.
That's great. I know my kids are both in college now, but I know that was a frustration and kind of a pain point all through their schooling. So you have my support at goal.
Topic. Yeah.
That's great. So tell us what is the state school board doing well right now? What are some things that are being effective in your view?
There's a lot of things that the state school board does that I don't, they're not really flashy, so people don't maybe pay attention to a lot of them, but they're really focused on the vision, which is another reason that I want to be on the school board, is to help shape that vision of what these students are as graduates. And I know that they have done a lot of work on that, so that we all have a common goal moving towards the future. I think that is very important, and I think that we need to keep looking down the road. They're also trying to adapt, and boy, did we just all find out how important that is to adapt to a new environment. I think we've all thought as the years gone on, we're going to need to adapt to more things in the future, and we're all adapting right now, and we're seeing the things that we were strong at, and we're seeing the things that we need to work on. So that will be something that the state board has been doing, but also will need to continue to do because it's ever changing. I think that the state school board, one of the things that they have been discussing is the issue with early morning starts. And there's been a lot of, news media discussion about that. But I think the state school board's kind of got some plans already in progress that work for everybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to readjust every bus schedule. We can have students take classes at home at a time that does work for them, and then they can, start into the brick and mortar part of the day a little bit later. So I think that there's some things that they are being very flexible and learning to adapt to solve problems before we've even thought of the problems.
That's great. That's really interesting. And, probably this brave new world that we're in right now is accelerating that
very much so. Very much so. Right. Yeah, I think, but it has been a trial, and it has been such a challenge on every front. But as I look at it, I'm also saying, hey, next year when I have students who are sick, or I have students who are going on vacation, or whatever the case may be, there's no more of this packet stuff. They're going to be able to just have their portal. I can put the lessons right there. They can do it when it works for them. Don't have to worry about getting lost in the suitcase or when they're too sick today to look at it. So I can see that there's a lot of great possibilities for the future because of this lesson that we're learning.
That's great. So Jessie, do you want to jump in with your infamous baiting question?
Well, I thought I could ask the flip side of what you did. Of you've said there are things that the state school board is doing pretty well. Obviously, there must be some things that need to be improved. What are some areas where you think there's some opportunities to really dig in there and do things better?
Okay, that's wonderful. 2 areas. Number one, I've already kind of addressed, and that was the part about testing. They are the drivers of the state test. And that test, along with the district test, along with the classroom test, we need to whittle that down and get that so that that's manageable for students. The other thing that there's two other things that I feel like I would like to address with the state board. One of those things is working with teachers so that we're attracting and keeping new teachers, and the amount of paperwork that teachers are having to do. New teachers, under the current requirements, are having to do a lot more work when the whole point of this was to help guide them into their new career in an easier way so that their mentor is able to help them and smooth that road. And instead I hear from so many new teachers that it's just a whole new college degree in this work that they're having to do. So I don't think that was the point of it, and I think we need to address that. The other issue that I am concerned about as a classroom teacher is it feels to me as though we keep adding more curriculum and adding more curriculum and adding more curriculum, and we never take anything away, and we don't lengthen the school day. So we need to find a way of bringing these things together or taking some things out. I understand, that for adults, it seems like it shouldn't be too difficult to do some of these things. And we frequently hear, oh, this is only going to take like 2 minutes to teach in your classroom. This isn't going to be a big deal. This is going to be really easy. This will just be, just this quick little thing you can do at the beginning of the day. Well, as parents, we know that sometimes it can take 10 minutes for your child to decide that they're going to put their shoes on when those shoes are sitting right there by them. And so, no, you don't get a first grader to meet with a group in a corner and discuss something and come back in 2 minutes. You don't get a fifth grader that can do that. And I know you can't get a high schooler to do that because they have to discuss the day's events. So there's a lot of those things that get brought into the curriculum, and we've got to look at that and say, realistically, how long is this taking? Where are we going to cut something out of the educational day that's going to, if it's this important, that we can make it? Or maybe it's not that important, and maybe somebody else just thought that a great way to take care of this problem is let's have the kids learn about it.
Yeah, I can tell you that, even as an adult, there's such an attention penalty for task switching. I can't even imagine what it's like for kids. Like for me, if I'm in the middle of something and someone says, oh, I just need a minute of your time, what they're really saying is, yeah, I need a minute of your time, and it's going to take me 20 minutes to figure out what you were doing before I interrupted you.
So true. So those would be 3 areas to start with that I would like to get to work on.
Great. I appreciate that you decided to run. I always say you have to be at least a little bit crazy to decide to do it because you're really putting yourself out there. I hear
that a lot.
Oh, you absolutely do. You subject yourself to so much scrutiny. And so I appreciate anyone who's willing to actually get out there and subject themselves to that. If you were stuck in an elevator with a voter for 30 seconds, what would you pitch them to say, vote for me?
The things that I would say to vote for me would be, number 1, I'm an educator. I understand educator. I am accountable every single minute of every single school day to students and parents. So number 1, I can do the job. I know the job inside and out, and I've been doing it for 24 years. The other thing I would tell them is that I have lived in this area my entire life. I know these people. I know what they want. I know what they don't want. And I want to represent them.
That's great. I appreciate your roots, and I appreciate your passion for representing the rural part of the state. I think that's really important. So just to kind of wrap up, tell us what else do you want voters to know about you? What is important to you? What is important for voters to understand? And then give a plug for your website or Facebook page, or how do voters find more information about you?
Okay. The thing that I would want voters to know, is kind of my wrap up with this whole thing, is that I've always had a 5, 10, 20-year plan for my life. And I think that is important for our education system. We need to be looking at these kindergartners and having a plan for when they graduate from high school, what will they be? I want students that graduate from a school in Utah to be a great citizen. I want them to know how to learn. There's no way we're going to teach them everything. This world is changing too fast, but they need to know where to go and how to learn and how to make sense of the knowledge that's there. I want them to be good workers. We need to have an employable workforce, students that are responsible, students that get in and go to work, students that care. And then I want them to be great leaders and great citizens, that they will be able to take charge of the next generation and go forth and do those things that are going to need to be done, whether they are the hard things or the fun things, that they can do them all. And I want them to know that part of being a great citizen is to care about your neighbor, to work together, to use civility, to be kind.
That's great. Those are absolutely worthy goals. What's your, do you have a website or a Facebook page, or where do people?
I do have both. The website is in the process of being put together at this time, but both of those are Vote Norton 2020. So on Facebook, I'm at Vote Norton 2020, and my website will be votenorton2020.com.
Okay. Very good. Well, we're sure grateful for your time. Thanks for coming out and on this new format that we've got here. And we'll get this published and get people out listening to what you've got to say. So Kristan Norton, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
You bet. This has been Color Country Politics, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Color Country Politics, a production in cooperation with Utah Politico Hub and graciously sponsored by Century 21 Prestige Realty at 121 North Main Street, Cedar City. Special thanks to Amoeba Crew for use of their song Background Indie Rock, licensed under Creative Commons. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Also, check out our YouTube channel where we post video of our interviews. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and our website at www.colorcountrypolitics.com.